Environment Scrutiny panel, and welcome to Paul Lewis from Swansea University, attending for item 7, air quality management.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi. And okay, so first of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
We've received apologies from Cabinet Member Andrew Stevens, Chair.
Thank you. And number 2, do we have any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? No. Okay, thank you. Any prohibition of whipped votes or declaration of party whips? No. Okay, and on to agenda point 4, minutes of the previous meetings. I know these are quite long with the letters as well. We did cover quite a lot in the previous meeting, so I'm just going to go through them as they are in the agenda pack. Please bring it to my attention if you have anything that you want to raise. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18. All in agreement? Could I have a proposer?
Yes, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Mary. And a seconder? Thank you, Alan. Okay, so on to agenda point 5, public question time. This week we have received no public questions, so that's quite a change from last week. So we can move straight on to agenda point 6, nature conservation project updates. So we have, thank you, Councillor David Hopkins and Paul Mellor. Do we have Deb Hill online?
No, Deb Hill is off on long-term sick.
Oh, I am sorry to hear that. Okay, so who's leading on agenda point 6?
So yeah, I'll just take members through that. It's for information report. Members would be aware that we've been reporting for the past four years on the recommendations from the Natural Environment Scrutiny Inquiry in 2019. A number of those recommendations had been completed last year, and the target date for full completion was March this year. There were 10 recommendations outstanding for this past year. They've now all been completed or are now part of other projects or ongoing commitments, such as maximizing grants, etc. So effectively all the recommendations have been concluded, and it's being reported back to that effect, and just asking committee to endorse the conclusion of the recommendations.
Okay, do any of the rest of the committee have any questions on this report? Councillor Mary Jones.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering if we've still got the recruited 3 temporary posts we had for the community green space officers, because I'm assuming they were grant funded, and natural environment volunteer coordinator, because obviously we would like the work to carry on, but I know a lot of it is unfortunately grant funded. And is that what Paul was referring to when he was saying about grants? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, if I may answer that. We had grant funding. It was supposed to be for 3 years for carrying out this work. Unfortunately, there was a delay in us receiving that grant funding, so we've only had it for a year, and it's not being continued past the end of June this year. So it'll be limited in terms of what we will be able to roll out, unfortunately.
Sorry, can I come back? Is there any hope of us getting different grant monies to cover at least some of these posts, if not all three?
As it stands, we applied for an additional 3-year funding package to keep those posts, and we were unsuccessful. So we may lose all those posts in June unless we come up with an alternative funding, which is remote at the moment.
Is there anything that the panel can do in order to support any further bids? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. What I would say, it's one thing Paul and his team are very good at is getting grant applications in there. It's very unfortunate on this occasion that they've been unsuccessful at the moment, but I can assure the committee that if there is any trawls or any other money available, then Paul certainly and his team will be looking for all avenues to try to get that funding. But it is the nature of grant-funded posts. You know, it's not easy by no means, and it is very much reliant on the availability of the grant. So I'm sure if there were availability, I'm sure Paul would find it, but it is tight. And the only thing I would say is resources within the council would not run to this either at the particular time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to say it is disappointing if we are going to lose these posts. You know, it is something I think it's quite important these days, but yes, I know it's in the lap of the gods. It does mention, I think, in the same section as the posts are referred to, installing a polytunnel for community groups. I just wondered where that had been installed. And then further on in section 22, I think, there's a mention of wild about your ward, developing maps and packs, and that so far schemes are being prepared for Town Hill and Morrison. I just wondered if there was a little bit more information on that, and whether it would be perhaps a good idea to look at some of the wards that are being pretty well covered by large-scale housing. You know, obviously, if areas are going to be concreted over in big quantities, then there is going to be a significant impact on wildlife and loss of green space, loss of hedges, etc., etc. Thank you.
Chair, if I come back on that one, this work is linked to that grant funding. There's a bit of overlap with the recommendations. So the temporary staff we employed have done a lot of ground truthing in all the wards as part of preparation for production of these maps. We've started to roll it out. Obviously, we've got the baseline information, but as it currently stands, there will be no resources to continue it after June. However, as Councillor Hopkins has said, you know, we will continue to look for funding, and there's no reason why we can't pick this up in future. There's a lot of work going on county-wide in terms of the environmental baseline. So, you know, we are well prepared for producing this. It is just a question of resources at this moment in time.
And just picking up from that, I also understand that Castle Ward was also identified as a priority ward alongside Town Hill and Morriston, but was not included due to an administrative error. Is there any plans to remedy this going forwards?
Again, Town Hill was part of the 4 wards. Castle was part of the 4 wards, including Town Hill, Morriston, that were identified. We invited proposals to be put forward. None were forthcoming, but that doesn't mean to say they can't be put forward if they're deliverable within the period to the end of June this year. But say the nature of grant-funded work is when you're coming towards the end of temporary contract periods, the members of staff will look, understandably, will look elsewhere. And we've already had one member of staff hand in their notice. So we are going to be limited in terms of what we can deliver within the next few months. And in fact, a scheme would need to be approved and signed off by the end of May to be able to claim the grant in any event, and we then have a month to deliver on the ground. So it is limited in terms of what we will be able to do. But there's nothing to say that we can't pick some of this work up with future grants.
Sorry, when you say proposals were asked for, can you clarify that, please?
The invite went out to councillors for any schemes they consider could be implemented within their wards on the basis that information was shared. Obviously with tight time periods, nothing was received within that particular window, and it was rolled on to another ward, but it doesn't preclude schemes still being proposed within the Castle ward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald, you've got a further question?
Well, yes, it was actually seeking an answer to the question I asked. Can you hear this?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Where was the polytunnel erected? Which ward was fortunate enough to have that?
I'm afraid off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can circulate that detail to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chris Evans?
Yes. Can you clarify what are the priorities between now and June?
Sorry, in terms of?
And in terms of the work that's being carried out with the remaining time and capacity.
Right. Okay. This is just. I think we're just focusing in on one aspect of one grant here, which is the NRAW grant, which comes to an end, and there are some ongoing projects in Town Hill and Morriston that we are looking to deliver in terms of greening up certain areas and improving a woodland area in Morriston. So those schemes are being discussed with the relevant ward councillors at this time.
Councillor Sarah Keaton?
Hi, yes, it does fill me with despair. I mean, I'm on the trustees of the Environment Centre, and we are desperately scratching our heads how to fill deficits of funding there. And it will be appalling if we lose the Environment Centre at a time where we claim there's a climate emergency going on. We really do need to find some funding somewhere. And they do such amazing projects, and they're out there working as hard as they can, doing as much as they can. They really do need the support. Thanks.
Councillor Fitzgerald, did you want to come back?
Sorry, Chair, my hand must be up. I thought I put it down. I'm having a few problems at the moment.
That's fine. No worries. Councillor Mary Jones.
Yeah, can Paul confirm if it's number 23, if we are having environmental links with school governing bodies and eco committees, because I know quite a number of schools now have got the Platinum Award for their eco-friendly schools, and it'd be a pity if we lose that. It does say March 2023, so I'm hoping that that has actually been done, although I can't recall it in either of the schools that I'm a governor. Do we as governors have to play a role? Thank you.
Absolutely. We've obviously done work with a number of the schools. Again, what we can do is limited with the resources. We have we're making some progress on this with through the Climate and Nature Program Board and Steering Group. But yes, it's a two-way thing. We we would want all governing bodies to have this environmental link governor who we can work more closely with. I mean, we have got good contacts with some schools, but not all schools. So yeah, that's still a little bit of a work in progress.
Sorry, can I come back? Who are they supposed to get in contact with? Is there an email address, or can you send us a link that we can use so that they're not scrabbling around looking for the right person to be linked with? Thank you.
Yes, you can do that. There's a generic nature conservation link that we can provide.
Councillor Sarah Keaton.
Yes, community councils have their place to play as well. I know we've been very active in Mumbles at getting out to the children. We give them a certain amount of budget each year so that they can do green projects. And if we're planting anything, we're planting trees in West Cross in the next week or so. And the children will be out helping us with that. And we're also, that's council based, and then community council based. We're hoping to get plants from a local store and plant them in the skate park on their rain garden. So hopefully teach the children the rudiments of suds as well while we're at it. But it does need to be very, we have to be active in getting that stuff started as well. But it's worth it. It's a real joy. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there Mark Wade, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to, I suppose, to reiterate the point that Councillor Hopkins made earlier on regarding the overall situation we find ourselves in. It is a challenging one in relation to funding and finance generally, but just to reassure members, as has been said, this work remains a priority to us, and we'll certainly, with the remaining resources we have, ensure that it continues in that vein, really. And as has been said, also that officers will continue to look for all available sources of funding to carry on the good work has been done. So just to give some reassurances around that, really.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Do we have any further questions or comments on item 6? No, okay. Moving on then to item 7, air quality management. Tom, I believe you're leading on this item.
Yeah, if I could just introduce this, Chair.
Yeah.
It's with great pleasure today that Tom is here and also his colleague from from the university. We do this very much in partnership with the university, and I'm very fortunate that Tom is here today to take us through the report. Didn't want to add nothing to this, but just put on record my thanks to Tom and his team for bringing the report here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning all. The report has been circulated already as an information report, an update on where we are with air quality in Swansea. it's been set out as the headlines really, and as David has referred to, quite fortunate to have Paul Lewis, Professor Emeritus at Swansea University Medical School, attending today to help and also to provide a response to any sort of health-based questions. Paul is heavily involved in research on behalf of the uni, but also in other streams of work that he does. And we have carried out collaborative work already, and we are currently carrying out some collaborative work at the moment. But essentially, going back to the report, just to give you the quick headlines on it, I didn't intend to go through it because no doubt you will have all read it. But to open up on the low and then working to the high, we have, sadly, due to the coronavirus pandemic, we were delayed in being able to complete our annual submissions as we are required by Welsh Government, but have worked with Welsh Government and the policy advisors there with Verity Pownall all the way through and have had their assurance and agreement on delivery schedules for that. And we are literally top and tailing the report now, ready for the last 3 years to be submitted to Welsh Government. So as soon as that is finalised and signed off, we will circulate obviously to the group here at the committee as well, so that you can see it. But the draft conclusions reached for it is that we are not exceeding any of the threshold concentrations set down in the legislation. The key ones being nitrogen dioxide and PM, particulate matter, PM10, where there's a threshold for us, which are more often than not are linked to combustion sources and primarily traffic sources, although there is a difference where we are in Swansea on the coast and the valley with some of the particulate emission with industry as well in the area. But we are currently compliant, which is good news. However, there's always a however. The Clean Air Bill consultations that Welsh Government have been undertaking over the last couple of years will change the targets that we are looking to sort of monitor and assess ourselves against. We don't know yet what the new targets will be. As I mentioned in the report, the World Health Organization have reduced their target for PM 2.5 down from 10 micrograms as an annual mean to 5. That isn't a threshold that's set and any sort of obligation for us. It's a health-based guidance. But our average, as it says in the report, is we bounce between 9 and 11 micrograms per year for PM 2.5 in Swansea over the 3 locations that we have. An element of that is driven by what comes in off the coast, off the sea, transboundary pollution as well. So I sort of approached this with a view of turning it back to the committee now about questions, because we're very lucky, as I say, to have Paul here, who will be able to answer some of the health-based research questions as well. And it's an opportunity for us to answer any questions that you may have. And also we can advise you where we're going with works in Swansea.
Thank you. We have questions from Councillor Chris Evans.
Hi, Chair. It's just oh, sorry. It's just to say that with Professor Lewis being at Swansea University, I should really note the personal interest because I do work at the university as well. It's not prejudicial, just a personal interest.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you. I don't know if Tom can actually answer the question. I heard on the either television, radio or somewhere in the media about a new bill in England about people with wood-burning stoves and emissions. And I'm sorry to say there is a problem because people, and I don't know if anybody here has got one, but they burn any kind of wood they can get hold of. And then everybody sort of upwind of it catches all the actual emissions. And I wondered if there's anything in Wales that's going to come in that can help residents, because I have to say they absolutely stink is the best way to put it. Thank you.
Well, I think before I bring Professor Lewis into this, because I know Paul is doing a lot of work on this with Welsh Government already, certainly in Wales, it is part of the Clean Air Bill that Welsh Government is working on. We were consulted last year on solid fuel domestic combustion, and there are various things within that consultation of measures to try and address the impact of wood burning. Initially, they'd looked at the contribution of PM 2.5 in wood burning at about 38% of PM 2.5 was due to wood burning. That's now been revised because trade has got involved and about how to quantify timber use into wood burners, etc. So that's actually reduced now, I believe, down to 21%, which Paul will correct me if I'm wrong. But off the back of that consultation, yes, measures were put out for responses, looking at potentially enhancing smoke control areas, restriction of sale of wet wood and house coal, for example. But that is part of what we're waiting to come back with Welsh Government. But Paul, if you're able to come in at this point, I know you've done some work and are doing some work with regard to this that you might be able to shed a bit more light onto.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. And, yes, wood burning, domestic burning now is an increasing problem in Wales, and I think the council is right to highlight that, not just in Swansea, but and other large urban areas, but our villages and some of our smaller urban areas as well. And so wood burning or domestic burning is now the largest contributor to PM 2.5 right across the UK, and a major concern of the Welsh Government as well. Tom's right, we're working closely with the Welsh Government in terms of what we might see in the bill, which should be announced this month, in terms of new legislation for the type of fuel burnt and wood burnt, as Tom said, in terms of moisture content being reduced around about 20%. So there would be strict regulations on suppliers of that fuel. But the Welsh Government are definitely looking at the usage of wood burners as well. I presented the cross-party group for Clean Air Act to Assembly members last week on other issues in terms of use of those burners and public attitude, people who have these wood burners and whether they care or not. And I think that's our biggest problem. So the government are looking at strategies for behavioural change going forward as well, in terms of educating people with wood burners, in terms of the health impact, etc. I'm happy to share that presentation with people here today. I can forward that to Tom for forwarding to everyone, in terms of, because they highlight what issues might be and what needs to be addressed in the Clean Air Act, which again we should see next year. But yeah, it's an increasing problem in terms, and of course that would be an increasing problem in terms of health impacts as well, especially for people with cardiovascular disease and respiratory disease.
Could I just ask if garden bonfires are also included in that? I know that many of us will get complaints about the unsociable hours, pre-7 o'clock bonfires that force people to go back indoors and stink everybody's laundry. But in fact, they are probably just as problematic outside of those unsociable hours as well in terms of particulates. So are they included in that report? Yep. Tom.
Sorry, Paul, if I just quickly to come in on that, I was going to add as well with wood burners as well, but as you've mentioned, bonfires, it's a perfect time to come in on it. Existing powers are in place under the statutory nuisance provisions under the Environmental Protection Act, whereby we can assess, and we do deal and receive a lot of complaints about burning, not just wood burners, but also open fires in gardens. Where there's no bylaw or law against it per se, we assess for statutory nuisance. So if we have it in an urban area, for example, and there's billowing smoke, odour, then yes, the powers exist already, and we do take action against individuals with regard to wood burning. It is difficult sometimes for us to catch people in the act, but we have out of our systems to try and attempt to catch that. But invariably, we'll pick it up in the daytime, going on site, having a chat with individuals, advising, educating, but there is always the small minority where we will have to go formal. But those powers, yes, already in existence, but I'm sure Paul will add now that it is being covered by the consultation as well.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Paul?
Yeah, to my knowledge, outdoor burning is being considered for the Clean Air Act as well, in terms of increased regulation.
Thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks. Just firstly, a comment on that. I think it's obviously very important and a key issue, but we want to make sure we don't become a nanny state, really. We're telling people what they can and can't put in their stoves. So that would also be an issue, I think, for me. My question's really around air quality around schools. I just want to know if every school in the authority has been checked or audited. And if there are any that don't meet or are in a place where the air's not what we deem safe or good enough, and what we do about that. Obviously, you can't just pick a school up and move it. So, you know, what would be the extreme case that we would go to if the air quality is bad around some schools, please? Thanks.
Sorry, before we continue, can I just ask everybody to check if you're not speaking to keep your mic on mute, please? Sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead, Tom.
On there. Apologies. Can you hear me better now? I didn't have my mic on. As I was saying, we don't monitor at all schools, but we do monitor at some schools. There are guidelines set in the technical guidance about areas of concern that we should, at some point through the LAQM process, have assessed. So we look at roads over a certain traffic flow, traffic light control areas. A school that's in the back streets would be different to a school that's on a main road area, for example. So we have assessed over the years various locations of interest, whilst gathering long-term data sets, but also hotspot concentrations. And as I said earlier in the report, we are currently compliant across Swansea, so we don't have schools in excess of the 40 micrograms for nitrogen dioxide. And that is the key pollutant that we look at sort of with traffic emissions. However, in line with Welsh Government's policy guidance, it's a twofold approach from Welsh Government. They require us to achieve compliance, but also work towards reducing public exposure. And that's what we're trying to do. So yes, we monitor at schools. We'll try and give advice where we can. Welsh Government has produced some educational resources through the Welsh Air Quality Forum, looking at Key Stage 2 and 3 and Key Stage 4. For packs there to help. We have done diffusion tube works in some schools before. We did one up in the Harvard Primary and Bishopston Primary as a contrast, and then down in Llanryddion as an agricultural area. And we are currently involved with 2 interventions that we're looking to test at Morriston Primary and at Oystermouth Primary, which are part of Welsh Government's LAQM Support Fund grant we had last year. Whereby we're looking at gathering data, looking at a potential green screen fencing intervention to test its effectiveness. So that's an ongoing study. We're just coming to the end of year 1 of the baseline data, with a view to looking to install these screens in the next coming months when the weather turns. So that's something we're doing at schools. We're also doing a bit of work on engine idling, which is work that we're in collaboration with Paul. And other colleagues in Swansea University from the School of Psychology, and also with a company called Vindico, we're providing some of the air quality kit. And again, that's looking at behaviour change. How can we test people turning the engines off? How can we make them aware? And how can we then monitor the impacts of that? And that's a bit of work that's coming to the end of stage 1 analysis. And we've got a follow-up intervention, which we're currently running, which I'm not trying to hide from, but I don't want to give too much information about because I don't want to impact the study because it's live as we speak, and I don't want to affect people's behaviours in the area we're in. But that will all be completed, and the analysis should be complete before Clean Air Day, which is in June. And the view would be that we would look at that as a council as putting forward a package of what we're doing. Depending on how the results come in, we would be looking at that as an intervention type approach to discuss with schools, to put forward a potential package of evidence-based measures that schools could look at. But the final point, Councillor, to talk about, yes, you can't pick a school up. Traffic is the key source, is the key impact when we look at air quality, particularly in Swansea. And we do have schools fronting onto main carriageways from the original sort of traffic and highway infrastructure that's there. You know, Routes to Schools works with the schools on, we used to have a car-free or a scoot to school week and things like that, which are great ideas to stop the parents bringing kids to school, but we do also need to consider the routes that the kids take to school, the streets they are walking, and there's a potential as well for future applications to Welsh Government's LEQM support grant, which we're being told there will be another call after in the next financial year, a bit earlier than previous years, and that is a target area that we're looking at. How can we develop our existing modelling capability with the view of thinking about a product or an output for safe routes to school? So kids can look at an online application on the phone, for example, and see, you know, the red route, the orange route, the green route, and make an informed choice. And that's sort of the thing we're thinking about. But again, it can only be carried out with external funding, because we don't have the resource internally, and it would be quite a large resource to do this. So that's the next approach for Welsh Government, and certainly looking at schools, you know, the exposure height is different with smaller children than adults, but that is certainly a focus for us as well.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just to confirm there's no schools that are raising alarm bells in the authority at all. Is there just...
We have no areas that are exceeding the thresholds that we are to report against, but as ever, we are looking at ways and potential ways to reduce exposure where we can, because there is no safe limit in that sense. Whilst you have a 40 microgram as an annual mean, 36 micrograms isn't safe. We know that, so we're still trying to work towards how we can reduce and the interventions, which is why we're testing and trialling the stuff now with the schools and engine idling and green screens.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to say anything about the health implications for children in this context?
Yeah, again, schools are a focus for them because of, you know, the main issue outside schools is idling, you know, cars idling, not just for NO2, but for fine particles as well. And Tom mentioned, you know, there's a difference between a child's height, which is much closer to an exhaust leveling, if you like, than an adult height. But engine idling outside schools is a problem. So the exposure, personal exposure to children and parents and teachers outside school at you know, in the morning and later in the afternoon is a lot higher than what it would be if they weren't outside that school. So it's a focus for government, and I think it should be. But we need more evidence in terms of what those exposure levels are and what the real health impacts are on children. The evidence we've got, we know that increases the risk of asthma developing in the child, and also increases the risk of asthma attacks in children as well. So. But we're still collecting evidence on that for Wales.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Evans.
Just a quick one, just going back to the Clean Air Bill consultation. Do you know if fireworks are part of that consultation?
From memory, no, but there was a separate consultation to do with fireworks, which I can certainly look back into. That was to do with content and use of sale, point of sale, but also looking at that classification from domestic garden into almost being able to get all the stadium type fireworks and the actual, you know, the impact of fireworks. But there was a separate bit of work on that, which I can sort of get back to the panel on later.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Keaton.
Hi. Yeah, hi, Tom. About 5-6 years ago now, I think we called you down to MCC because we were concerned about this problem with cars idling outside and traffic outside schools. And I think you were able to reassure us to a certain extent, but also said, get back to me in a few years' time because we'll be studying the air standards and we'll be able to look at smaller particles and how they affect health and our lungs. So I take it that's the case now. I understand Councillor Thomas's concern about Oystermouth School because we were all quite concerned about that because it's below the level of the road, really. The school is lower and there's lights just outside the school and cars do stop there, obviously, while the lights change. And we do wonder, because it's mostly concrete, that's the front of the, it'd be very hard to make it green. So I don't know quite how you do it. So one question is about the particulates. How much more sensitive can you see them now and see the damage? And secondly, how are you going to green up a school like Oystermouth? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the intervention that's currently underway, 1 year in, at Oystermouth Primary, we have an earth sense unit, it's called by the company, on a lamppost, solar panelled unit, and we also have one in a cage in the playground, which is looking to test boundary and in the yard concentration. And that's actually monitoring PM10, PM2.5, so the particulate matter. So PM10 respirable, 2.5 will get further down into the lung, into the alveoli, and actually cross the blood, the membrane barrier, and we'll get into bloodstream. So that's where we're monitoring at those standards. We've also got nitrogen dioxide and ozone on site as well. So we've been monitoring there now for 12 months. So the intention there that we were looking, the intervention we're looking to trial was the green screen. So we have the screens. They're currently at the Botanical Gardens being looked after. They were purchased through the grant. So the point there, what we're looking to do is actually install along the railing area, basically a fence line of a green screen to test it. There's a bit of research and stuff out there in peer-reviewed publication where if you're looking at NO2 reduction, you need a depth of screen for absorption. But what we're looking to test is, what impact as a filter, as a physical barrier to particulate matter will it have? And that's why we're testing it. We need to evidence what will happen. We've got a screen we installed several years ago down in Portennant on the junction of Fabian Way and Portennant Road as part of Paul, who was on the line earlier, as part of the Nature Conservation Grant work with Deb Hill, we put that in. So we can see how quickly it'll grow. So we're looking to test this over time. It's not a quick test, unfortunately, but we need to try and evidence the concentrations. That being said, the initial concentrations we're getting back are showing that Oystermouth is compliant with the air quality standards. However, we know those are going to change. So just because it's compliant doesn't mean we're going to stop. Okay, we're going to keep looking. And for NO2 more so than 2.5, for PM, NO2 will drop off significantly with distance from the curbside. It will dissipate over distance. So what you monitor at the curbside, we will see less in the yard. But what we're looking to see is what that screen will, what impact that screen will have. Likewise, in Morriston, busier environment for the traffic, we're looking at that as well. Two different types of environment. You've got the lights at Oystermouth, not at Morriston. And that's the point. We're trying to gather the evidence to inform an educated decision. And with regard to how much more sensitive monitoring is, for example, and the damage, Paul, would you be able to sort of just add a little bit there on the health impact and the monitoring capability with your experience?
Well, in terms of concentration reduction?
Yeah, and PM particularly, if we're possible, for 2.5. It's becoming easier to monitor for 2.5, and it's certainly becoming more widespread as the start, but then obviously the potential health impact of 2.5 and the importance of 2.5, I should say.
Yeah, it's much easier to monitor PM2.5 with lower cost sensors now, as we're doing in that study in Newton Road. So you can have wide distribution of monitors for PM2.5. So I think over the next sort of 3, 4, 5 years, you can see a lot of studies being published in terms of how PM2.5 varies across areas like schools. And again, in terms of health impacts, with children at school, it's the development of asthma. Nobody knows what the thresholds are for PM2.5. We all vary considerably in terms of what our tolerances are. So, the World Health Organization, when PM2.5, the annual limit reduced to 5, as Tom said earlier, 5 micrograms per cubic meter per year. I think for most people that would be fine. But, if that was 7 or 8, then that could impact on some children or some people living there or not. And others could be, have real tolerance to that. So, it's about getting PM2.5 down to as low as possible, and you're always going to have background levels as well. You'll always have transboundary PM2.5 being blown in from other areas as well. So I think so long as you're trying to get it down to as low as possible, you'd see quite a large reduction, I would imagine, in new asthma cases going forward. COPD, exacerbations, people with respiratory disease, and hopefully a reduction in cardiovascular episodes as well within that area.
Could I just come back for a moment on that? Are you finding that this, since the pandemic, since COVID, that's become more sensitive to do with more people with damaged lungs, for instance? Has that become, I was just wondering if you get funding from the NHS or something for it.
There's quite a lot of studies that have been published very quickly. They're a little bit preliminary because during COVID, they wanted to publish respiratory research as quickly as possible. Yeah, there's perhaps stronger studies being published now in terms of the impact in terms of people who are more vulnerable. It's definitely the case for some asthmatics, certainly for COPD and cardiovascular disease. Yeah, we still haven't had final findings and conclusions in terms of whether people were more generally susceptible to the impacts of PM2.5 if they had COVID or worse they had COVID. But I would imagine you'd see World Health Organization will publish data on this year, I would imagine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was very interesting to hear what has been said about the bonfire impact, and I think all of us will have had issues around people burning in private gardens. But what I wanted to ask now, there is a view out there that 20 miles an hour on so many roads as is coming in September is going to increase the potential for pollution, in the same way that there is a view that traffic humps, which slow down the traffic, adds to the pollution. And in my ward, I am quite concerned that the main road, which is an A road running from Penflegare, Junction 47 to Cassimon, is being narrowed quite considerably in parts. And this will mean that if a car wants to turn right at a junction, say, it can no longer go into a separate right turning lane. So in effect, a car that wishes to turn right, if the traffic lights are wrong, if the queue of traffic in the opposite direction is wrong, will not be able to do so and will hold up a queue of traffic behind. And I'm just wondering if this kind of thing is being looked at in any way, and if there is a view out there about the impact of 20 miles an hour, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. With looking at speed humps, for example, traffic humps that have been installed over many years, I am aware of a bit of work from up in Oxford, and also Transport for London had looked at bits and pieces where whether or not it increased or reduced was not necessarily clear cut, but what it did show is that it moved the actual initial sort of hotspot plume away from that area. So what you have is a car slowing down for the hump, but then would accelerate away from that area. And what we do tend to find is that you will get increased emissions when an engine is under load on acceleration or on a slope going uphill, for example. So yes, there's certainly evidence out there to look at the impact of speed humps with air quality in mind. The 20 mile an hour limit, I certainly have read previously that a lot of that focus was on accident statistics as well, and that's not an area that I look into. So will there be an impact of pollution? If we have smoother flowing traffic, then that's better. That's what we're looking for. But yes, I understand what you're saying about a right turn. If you have a build-up of traffic, then that will lead to congestion. And for particulate, for example, congestion on a petrol, diesel vehicle, or an electric vehicle, it's a similar issue for particulate. Maybe not so much NO2 with an electric, but you're going to have brake wear, tyre wear. You have that particulate input. Sorry. So the key way of trying to reduce it, yes, unfortunately, is by reducing the source, the volume of source, whether that's by emissions, by number of vehicles on the road. That's the key area for, I think, for target, and that's what a lot of policy is looking at. But that's work that we'll have to input to our highways colleagues on when we look at infrastructure design. Paul, anything that you're aware of on the 20 mile an hour?
Yeah, we've done bit of a review with in the clean air programme. I mean, there's not enough evidence out there at the moment. The evidence that is there does suggest that driving 20 miles per hour generally leads to improvement in terms of PM 2.5 exposure. I think the key thing, Tom, is as you said, braking and tyre wear. You get less braking at 20 miles per hour. The issue for me in looking at this is when you do have speed humps, you are braking more. So I think we need more evidence around that. The combination of 20 miles per hour plus speed humps in areas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bridget Rowlands.
Thank you. Sorry, going back to the idling of vehicles outside of schools, is that the parents? I'm just wondering if it's caused by the parents collecting the children, and if that is the case, I think just looking here, there was legislation brought into the UK in 2018 under the Road Traffic Act to fine to fine vehicles that are seen to be idling. Would it maybe be worth getting information out to the schools to try and educate the parents on not doing that outside the schools then?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, powers exist for stationary idling offences. It's written into clauses within the bus contracts I'm aware of already for school transport provision. The idling at schools it's a mixture. Yes, there'll be an element of parents waiting to pick their children up. The effect will be dependent on what type of location the school is in. But we also then have the impact of, I know Oystermouth has been used as an example here today already. The idling there won't be predominantly from parents picking their kids up. It'll be from the traffic lights that are outside the school, because the nature of Oystermouth is, it's hard to park anywhere in that area to go and collect the kids, unless off the bat, because of the type of the village it is. But we have a set of traffic lights outside. You have traffic lights outside Brynhyfryd Primary as well. You have a crossing there as well. So looking at engine idling is greater than just the parents picking up. It's looking at the behaviour of motorists, newer vehicles, stop-start engines. That is designed to take away that problem. But you can override the stop-start on an engine. So it's making people, and what we're trying to do at the moment with the interventions we're testing is gather the evidence to be able to say, this is what we've monitored, this is the percentage of idling taking place. Well, actually, this is the concentration that's happened because of it. So we're trying to evidence that intervention so we can look to try and roll that out or make it available as a package of options for schools if they wish. And phase 2, which we're doing now, as I say, we'll be ready to report on that by June for Clean Air Day. But I don't want to go into too much because we're getting ready to run the intervention, so I don't want to affect people's judgment when they get there. Once that's done, by end of April, we should be completely finished on all the studies, etc. So you will probably see something coming through your wards now when we start and testing that intervention. But that's primarily looking at behaviour and what impact that will have on concentration due to idling.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the panel? No. And Paul, did you have any additional comments that you wanted to make?
Just two brief comments. In terms of Welsh Government are looking at this at the moment. In terms of improving information flow, and I think we need better information flow right across the board, right through the healthcare providers, through the NHS, so that patients and the public are aware of the impacts, health impacts of air pollution. Schools, but they should be able to provide information to parents so they are able to make the decision themselves not to idle outside schools. Councillor Thomas said earlier on, we don't want a nanny state, and I absolutely agree with that. And in terms of wood burning, I think if people knew what they were putting into their wood burners, the health impacts on their neighbours and themselves as well. Whenever you open the door of that wood burner, you get a huge increase in PM 2.5 right in front of your face. If they had that information, they can make their own decisions and hopefully then think about what they're burning and the impacts on their neighbours, etc. So we need huge improvement in information flow and information provision from government all the way down to the public. And that's what's being looked at by Welsh Government now, and there's reviews currently going on into how that can happen and how it should happen.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Are there any other questions or comments on agenda point? Oh, Councillor Mary Jones.
Yeah, sorry, it's a quick question for Tom, really. Going back to wood burning stoves, and I'm sorry, I agree about a nanny state because people have to live next to these people. But can we actually approach people now before the bill comes in? Because we know of one person that has builders dropping off any rubbish that seems to be in old garden fences and bits of wood that have come from goodness knows where, and it just dumps it in the person's garden, and then they just put it in there, and they have 2 wood burning stoves. So of course the neighbours have a double whammy. Can we actually take action if I gave you the information?
What I would say there, yes, all the details played to us, and we can certainly investigate. If you're burning fuel in a stove, a wood appliance, for example, you know, the initial advice straight off the bat that you don't burn treated timber. So even if you've got a tannalised fence post, that's not to go in. So we can certainly look at it from potentially nuisance or waste offences, and also, you know, trade shouldn't be dropping off trade waste. So there's a couple of options there that we can look at. But yes, certainly send me the details, and we'll get involved and see what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on item 7? No, okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 8, local flood risk management annual update. Can I just ask who's leading on this item?
Yeah, I'll just introduce it if that's okay. I know Mike Sweeney is there to present, so I won't steal any of his thunder on there, but it's part of the, I guess, the regular updates we provide in terms of what the authority is doing and what the duties and responsibilities are relating to flood risk reduction, flood risk management. So I know the report's been circulated, but if I could hand over to Mike, and if that's okay with you, Chair, just to run through some of the key points.
Yeah, if I just could come in and give an apology for Councillor Andrew Stevens. He asked me to pass out his apologies this morning. I should have done it at the beginning, I'm sorry. He's unable to attend, so he has asked me if there are any political questions. I'm more than willing to take them. I work very closely with Andrew on particularly these issues. So it's yeah, a lot of work has gone on. I know we've had a live bid, particularly of the VRF, to try to do as much as we can preventative work to put the kit in place to clean more gullies and storm weather drains on a regular basis, to try to put prevention in place rather than be proactive, rather than you know, reactive really. So we're very fortunate to have Mike Sweeney with us today, who's, I would say, one of the leading roles on flood management and has been for many years. So more than happy to hand over to Mike Sweeney to give his sort of thing where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just introduce myself, Mike Sweeney, Team Leader of Drainage and Coastal Management. My headline today is 250,000 properties at risk of flooding in Wales. That's 1 in 8 properties. So effectively, what I've tried to do with my report is to give you an update on the roles and the duties that we do as an authority, as a lead local flood authority, where we have responsibilities to reduce and manage flood risk within our area. So I've done the report, I completed and shared it to you all, so hopefully you've had a good read of it. In terms of the main headlines, which I want to bring to your attention today, it's referred to section 2, and it's is the key activity which is just in front of us now is to produce a local flood risk management strategy and an additional flood risk management plan. We did do a strategy back in 2013, but there's a need now to review it, review the policy statements and the actions which we propose within that plan. So we need to review that. But the difference this time is that we've got to combine it with a flood risk management plan and produce actions where we foresee problems with our areas and how we will deal with that flood alleviation and how we will deal with those communities most at risk of flooding. So that's ahead of us. I welcome questions on that specifically, actually, because it's something that we need to agree going forward. But as I say, the actions within the local flood risk management strategy, these will include further commitment to understanding of flood and coastal risks and ensure that stakeholders understand their roles and responsibilities. As Swansea Council, it's very important to realise that we have a huge coordination role amongst other risk management authorities. So that's really, we need to take a front end and a lead on flood risk, and just to remind members of that, because I noticed a few new faces here today which perhaps are not aware of that we do need to take a lead and coordinating role in flood risk management in Swansea. So I just want to put that out there. We need to work together with other flood risk management authorities, the likes of Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Water, and other key stakeholders. We need to raise awareness and emergency planning in our communities most at risk. We need to prevent and increase. We need to prevent flood risk as a result of new developments. It's very important, especially with the onset of the new TAN 15, where we need to inform our colleagues in planning to steer development away from those areas at high flood risk. We need to continue our good work in establishing regular maintenance activities on drainage assets. We currently undertake this, and I think Councillor Hopkins just alluded to it. We need to continue those activities, and then we need to prioritise investments in our communities most at risk, and this will form part of the flood risk management plan going forward. So I welcome any questions really on the report. There's quite a few elements or themes within it. So if you take it from there.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
Sorry, perhaps I'll keep quiet after this one. Thank you, Mike, and I'm sure you're probably going to realise what I'm going to ask. It's at the bottom of page 46, going on to page 47. It's about the Welsh Government grant funding, and obviously in the middle there it says about Calais Square and the business justification case. I wondered how all these schemes actually were progressing, but obviously more importantly Calais, because as you know we had to have external consultants because of the complexity of the case, and that went in quite a while ago. It has been better, dare I say so, because as you've just outlined, the drains and things have been cleaned more often, so that anytime we know there's severe weather, they actually do come along and clear the drains, which we are extremely grateful for. My other question is, I think there was a flood risk map on the television recently about Wales. So is Swansea more at risk of areas flooding than other parts of Wales? Because it did seem to be quite a lot of red. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yeah, just to reply to you then, with regards to the progress of Calais Square business case, it's nearly there to completion. So I don't want to steal the headlines from that until I've had the completed document. But what we're finding with most of our business cases, they're taking much longer to complete than originally envisaged, and that's because the complexities and the work that's needed to complete them you find is continually extended throughout the process. But we're nearly there with that business case. We are aware of Calais Square. It is a concern to us, but and that's why we enhanced our maintenance activities in the area, especially on Calais Square itself and in Wimmerfield Avenue, where there's obviously areas subjected to heavy leaf fall. So we're conscious that there is an area of concern, but obviously we have other business cases in Swansea as well. So what you find is that when these are submitted to Welsh Government, the business case for Calais Square will be compared with other business cases in Wales, and the schemes that are taken forward need to be based on the factors against risk to property. So that's the driver for schemes be taken forward, the risk to property. But until such time I have the completed business case in for Calais Square, then obviously I'm not at this stage to comment any further.
And my second point about Swansea being more at risk than any other areas of Wales.
Certainly with the new flood maps that Natural Resources Wales have produced, it's obviously created some real concerns for Swansea. I think across Wales is probably the same boat, within the same boat in terms of sea level rise and future increases in rainfall intensities. So I think across Wales, flood risk is going to be very much a battle, a challenge for all local authorities, and we need to plan ahead to mitigate against the effects of climate change and the increased rainfall, which are on our doorsteps.
Okay, Councillor Chris Evans.
Good morning. My question really is around the Black Pill project. I know Dŵr Cymru had objected to the plans because they hadn't been consulted about a foul sewer that was being affected by the work that's due to happen in Black Pill. Do you know if this has been rectified and Dŵr Cymru have been spoken to?
Yes, this has been raised, and the consultant who was managing the project has discussed it with Welsh Water. From our perspective, though, they were consulted a couple of years ago on the proposal to divert the sewer. So it's just reviewing what conversations were held in the past and making sure that Welsh Water come on board with our proposals. But yes, I think we are in discussions with them at the moment.
Oh, excellent. The only other. Sorry. The only other point on Black Pill is there's been issues with sand blocking the outflows in Swansea Bay. I think the same's happening in West Cross and further along. Do we know if any work is scheduled to keep the outflows clear?
We're aware of the outfall. I think it's at the end of Brockle Stream. That does tend to block with sand, and we have cleared it in the past. So if that's the case at the moment, then we'll carry out the same function to clear the outfall. But there are concerns along Swansea Bay as a whole. Actually, we find that the sand levels are increasing, and there's other areas as well where outfalls are being affected by the increase in sand levels. So something that we need to consider as a concern for us going forward, definitely.
Thank you. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a comment. My ward is elevated, as you will know, but back in 2020, there were 8 properties, council-owned properties, that were flooded. And more recently, last year, 2 of these 8 were flooded again. Now, obviously, there are issues that are being addressed, which I'm very pleased about. But my concern is that the system, the surface water system, is going to be challenged by a further 166 houses being granted planning permission to go onto it. Now, I'm assuming, obviously I've read all the planning documents, but I'm assuming, Mike, that there will be regular checks in future on the issue of so much surface water, further surface water being discharged into a system which has had some significant challenges and which is still having a few difficulties. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. The good work we do in Swansea, which needs to be recognised, is that when we assess planning applications and the larger scale developments. We use a national standard which we look at so that new development doesn't impose flood risk to the existing infrastructure, you know, and that includes sort of all elements of the drainage design, and we make sure that it's designed in accordance to best practice and compliance to TAN 15. But that doesn't mean to say we won't keep on monitoring the situation. We have surveyed the area and the culverts serving Llewellyn Park and that sort of estate. But going forward, if there's any further work needed on monitoring, then yes, of course, that's something we're obliged to do. But with the introduction of the SUDS legislation as well, what we'll find is that the flood risk from new developments it's never been sort of, in my opinion anyway, it's always been well controlled. As a council, we well control it and put certain conditions on developers to make sure that there is no increased runoff in the lower catchment. So that's something to bear in mind as well.
Thank you. On a slightly related note, I was going to ask you about maybe some of the systems that we have in Swansea, drainage systems that are older and perhaps need improvement. I'm thinking particularly in my ward of the Sandfields area, which has historically had quite a problem with flooding even before some of the challenges that we're facing today, and what plans are in place to improve those kinds of older infrastructures that are really struggling with some of our current challenges.
Yeah, that's a valid point, Chair. Our infrastructure in Swansea is dated or old, and to cater for the rainfall events that we currently experience, we are having difficulties and flooding events where obviously I've worked here for 30 years and new things are appearing all the time. I think that's to do with the rainfall intensity increasing. But what we do as a drainage unit, we have a programme where we're trying to collect asset data, that is survey culverts and drainage assets which we think are important to flood risk, checking on their condition, and obviously if it's following a flood event, like the one you mentioned in Sandfields, to try and understand the cause of that flooding. If it's down to the capacity of the system, then we need to take further steps forward to try and find a solution. And I understand where you're coming from, and that's something that we're in our plans to take forward as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Joe Hale.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Chair. We have heard a couple of times this morning about planners and planning, and I'm just wondering why the planning department, because we've all know some of the stories, don't we? Why some of our floodplains have been allowed to be given planning permission for housing estates and new builds. So maybe it might be a good idea to get someone from the planning department to come to this panel. And the other point I was going to make was just to say to Mike, you know, just commend him and all his workforce, really, especially during this time of the year, because I know they're really busy. And just thanks for all the hard work that they continue to carry out on behalf of the authority.
Yeah, certainly. I echo that thanks, and I'm sure many of the other panel do as well. Councillor Mary Jones.
Oh, thank you. Mine actually crosses into planning as well, I think. I have another bugbear, so Will's going to be really happy with me, Councillor Will Thomas. Again, about gardens being paved over or tarmacked over, and I don't think we have any legislation at the moment to stop it. And obviously, we don't want cars parking on verges, pavements, etc. But we are having a problem where people are completely getting rid of grass and shrubs in gardens, which would normally have absorbed a lot of the water. Are there any plans for us to try and change that going forward? I know obviously the LDP runs for quite a few more years, but is it something that we can look at to require people to have planning permission to do this? Because I think it is becoming a bit of a problem. Thank you.
I agree there, Councillor Jones. I think when residents have their, you know, sort of undertake works and sort of increasing impermeable areas, and obviously that does have an effect on runoff. But over the years, that's been uncontrolled, non-policed. There's no legislation to support any intervention. But certainly with new developments, what we have seen is a lot of these hard landscaped areas turn into softer features, and in some instances, permeable paving. So, you know, we're trying to get most of the water now to go to ground on new developments, if possible. If not, then we look at attenuation and storing water on developments. So there are ways to reduce runoff, especially for new applications, but the older and the sort of historical developments which property owners have carried out, then obviously that's you know, something we can't really be involved with now.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Keaton.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with Mary on this. I absolutely despair of the fact that you see the drives going in and there is no, you know, they've got their pipes that allow the water to go elsewhere, which doesn't help the people lower down the hill. And it's ridiculous because you've got water gardens and you've got attenuation stuff going in new, and then people are still doing their patios and everything else. They're not thinking we need to keep the water here. So yeah, I think we do need legislation actually on it. And yeah, we're safe. Will isn't here to tell us off. Thank you.
Councillor Chris Evans.
Yeah, I completely agree with Councillor Jones and Councillor Keaton. I was also going to say that probably worse than paving is AstroTurf, which is which is basically just plastic, and it'll either just run off or just hold the water, and there's just no way that the water will go through it.
Okay, thank you. And Michael Locke.
Right, I would just like to ask, a lot of driveways now, recently, are we using this resin? Now, does water go through that resin? And the second point is with AstroTurf. AstroTurf is basically a carpet. It's basically a plastic carpet. And they are really bad. But I would like to ask whether these resin drives do actually breathe and do actually allow water through them. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's not within my expertise, but I understand that some of the resin drives can be porous.
Right.
But you know, as I say, it's outside my expertise, unfortunately.
Because these drives do tend to go in fashions. Like a few years ago, everybody was having these blocks, whereas now, certainly in Sketty, most people are having these resin drives. So anyway, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm understanding from the panel that perhaps we would, we all have some quite strong feelings on SUD's use, whether that's on verges or private drives and properties. I don't know whether, do you want to say anything on that, Councillor Hopkins?
What I would say is, obviously, Mike works very closely with our planning department on new bills, and new bills are only subject to SUDs. That legislation only applies to new bills. So any existing would not. There's no legislation in place or any guidance on that, particularly at the present time. And we can only act within the remit of the law in reality. So it is difficult, and more people are having the drives, as you say, but. On new bills, there is existing legislation in place, and the planting is very much part of the SUDs as well. So, it got ongoing. They must ensure that some of these areas cannot be paved going forward, because that would be very detrimental to the way SUDs is planned and used as well. So it is about putting the right plants in the right place to ensure that. That the soak away the water is used properly. So unfortunately, we can't do anything with existing, but there is plans. But just people's a couple of comments about the plan is not here today. I will reiterate how closely we work with Mike on all developments going forward, and work within the scope.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Locke, did you have further questions, or is that a legacy hand? No. Okay, Councillor Sarah Keaton.
Yeah, SUDS is brilliant, but I think we're still going through the stage where we're trying to suck it and see and work out. It's got to be aesthetically pleasing, and it's got to feel safe as well. And some of these pits, as came up in planning recently, are terrifying. I mean, they look like a health and safety nightmare. So I think we really have to work with the public, and planting would be very good. Planting would be very useful. I mean, throwing a few seeds down there and hoping for the best in these enormous pits. I think there's got to be a better way to work with the SUDs and to interpret them in different ways, maybe depending on areas. Because some of them are I personally do not want to see people scared of SUDs because of some badly put together designs. And I think you have to work with the engineers, really have to work with the landscape gardeners on this to make it something we could be proud of and attractive. It's a bugbear of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
I'm really sorry. I thought I was going to say nothing at all, but Councillor Keaton and I actually had this discussion very, very recently. But I'm not sure if everybody on the panel actually knows what I can't say it now, attenuation ponds are and how they work. And I think it would be useful if the panel actually knew why they are so widely used on new properties, especially. I raise it in planning probably every meeting about how dangerous I think they are, and we're told, oh no, they're fine, because they're not fenced in and they can be anything up to 6 foot deep. And they're not always covered in water because of the way they are meant to work. And I think the panel should actually have some understanding of what we're talking about with SUDs and the impact on these new properties, these new builds, which are not just individual houses. I'm talking about sites, because to my mind, they are extremely dangerous. And I'm just waiting for, hopefully not a child, but maybe an adult, to fall into one, because the planting is what we're saying, Councillor Keaton and I particularly, that there are ways of mitigating some of the measures with these ponds, and maybe we need to be far more strict with builders and developers about the use of them and how they can fit into the natural environment. Thank you.
Councillor Keaton, did you want to
keep it short? I was just going to say I've had some training on SUDs. It's not that I'm anti-SUDs, and I know we need to use these attenuation pits of despair, but I think that we do need more training. And I was going to say to Mary that Penny is looking for people. Penny Griffith is putting together training package right now that we can join, and I'm sure there'll be a number of us who would get a lot out of it. I know I'm thinking a little naive. Knowledge is a dangerous thing at the moment, so I'm going to go back to get a bit more. So I think we should all sign up for it. Thank you.
I'm sure the panel members would welcome any further training, so perhaps we can discuss that further outside the meeting. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Yes, it's been an interesting discussion, and I'll just throw this into the mix that, yes, I have another new development. Pentagare has been concreted over, as you will have gathered. 184 houses has been approved, another 600 due to be approved. And there is an attenuation pond, which hasn't been very successful because all the surface water has run off a considerable distance west and has gone into Pentagare Pond, which is an amenity pond used by fishermen and was beautifully clear. It is now contaminated with heavy mud. It has been a huge problem. Natural Resources Wales have had to be involved, and they are far from happy with what has happened. So please be warned that even on new developments where everything is supposed to be done by the book, it doesn't seem to always happen. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah Keaton.
I do apologise. This is my last time. I was just going to say to Wendy, that doesn't sound like a very well put together then attenuation pond, because there's supposed to be gravel, and the idea is it's supposed to act like almost a filter. Well, it's a filter. So any of the dirty water comes off, goes through, and what comes out, if it is, shouldn't overflow, but what comes out should be cleaner. So that's a bit dodgy.
Theory. That's the theory, but in this case, I think the water flooded out over the level of the pond. Whatever it is, it didn't work, and it's been a bit of a major disaster. So,
oh dear. Okay, that's sad.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to come back on regarding these discussions?
Panel aware that the SUDS legislation was brought into being by Welsh Government, who were keen to promote features which were sustainable features, green infrastructure and ponds and like, which provide multiple benefits to a development. So, you know, you're not just looking at flood risk and flood drainage design, you're looking at providing an enhanced biodiversity element to the scheme, enhance the amenity value to the site. And that basically means that a lot of drainage features and conveyance through sites will be above ground. They will be in these rain gardens and swales, and they will end up in ponds. And I think that that creates this biodiversity improvement to an area. And these ponds then, you know, when we get an application in from a developer, we got certain standards to approve that scheme. And that scheme does take into account risks to, you know, to the sort of the risk as a result of a pond. So we work to what they call a Syria guidance standards, making sure that ponds aren't so deep that they cause a nuisance, but obviously there will be a body of water within them in certain rainfall events. So, you know, it's something that we are aware of, but we do use national standards to approve schemes. And I think all authorities in Wales do use the same standards as well.
Thank you. Councillor Keaton, did you want to come back in?
No, I do apologise. I'm togging this time, but I was going to say with the training, perhaps it is important for us to be quite strict and say that all the council workers who are involved in setting up SUDS and the officers do get training in SUDS outside of what they're getting now, so that they really, really understand the whole concept of it. Because it doesn't sound like Wendy's experience was very good. And I think it would be useful. I mean, extra trainings, because SUDS is with us now, isn't it, for good? And that's a good thing. It's something we should embrace, but we do need the training. Thank you. I will be quiet now.
Councillor Hopkins.
Can I say the majority of these cases work very well? I do sympathise with Councillor Fitzgerald's issue. I know the Planning Department and Natural Resources Wales have been heavily involved in that, right? And but what I wouldn't want to say is all these case studies and all SUDS are a problem. Far from it. They're not there to create a problem, but they are there to create habitat and that's right. But there has been, and I will admit, there has been certain issues within Wendy's, this development, and matters are ongoing to try to resolve that. And I take note of that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments, questions, or otherwise on item 8, local flood risk management? Stuart, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just briefly, I think just to reassure on the issue with the SUDS, the swales and the ponds that are set in place, they are, as Mike said, they are designed to sort of guidance in terms of safety measures. They've all got gentle slopes in terms of on there, so the you know, if someone does go into the pond, then it is you know, there are straightforward routes to get out, and you know, there's no steep sides or challenges and things on there. So health and safety has been very much considered as the guidance has been put forward, and certainly all our staff involved have you know, fully embedded in this. It's a duty and a legislation put forward by Welsh Government, but we're you know, it does mean a kind of a change in mindset as developments come forward. I think what I would say in the past is that drainage was very much something which you just didn't think about, stuck some pipes in the ground and all the water went away. But the difficulty is it concentrates that massively, and it pushes that water downhill, which causes, you know, problems further downstream, or, you know, in the case where there's combined sewers, then you get huge issues with sewage and different things on there. So so yeah, there are robust processes in place, but it is a continuous learning exercise, and certainly I think I'd welcome a kind of wider kind of understanding of that from, you know, certainly members and things as to what SUDs actually mean and what they entail. And really, the last comment I had was, you know, we have got sort of very much as a council, as mentioned, you know, good staff involved. We've got robust processes, procedures, and policies in place to try and limit the impact of floods. But I would say, you know, the one massive challenge we've got, and has been seen in, you know, the UK and certainly in other countries, is the intensity of rainfall from the climate change that we're experiencing. So, you know, there's a lot we can do, but this doesn't mean that you know, we will not have flood events again. We just need to have everything in place to consider it and have the best approaches, really. But you know, we're seeing some quite horrific intensity of rainfall. I think certainly some of the examples that were seen last year in Germany and things, you know, the kind of level of it, as well as the UK, it's very severe. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
Sorry, I'm taking over from Sarah now. I just wanted to make the comment. I know we need, you know, different ways of drainage, and I agree with SUDS, but I make the point at attenuation ponds, to me, unless they're properly done, are dangerous. A child can actually drown in 2 inches of water, which isn't very much, it's a puddle. And some of these ponds that I sit on planning, I've sat on planning for nearly 24 years and seen all the different things come forward. And I'm really, really concerned. And I do make the point because I don't think all of them have been done perhaps to the standard that we would expect. And when we were recently, which was as recent as yesterday, talking about one in West Cross, then we were having to ask all the time about how they were going to manage it. And to be fair to Councillor Keaton, she kept on asking about the gravel and the planting, and you know, we know some areas will be boggy. That again can be dangerous in its own right. And I do realise we have to do something, but we must make sure that safety is our #1 concern, and they must be managed correctly. And otherwise, you're going to have the problems that Councillor Fitzgerald has encountered, which I know have been quite dramatic. Thank you.
Stuart, did you want to come back on that? Or is that a legacy hand?
Apologies, legacy hand.
Okay, no worries. Are there any other comments, queries, or other on local flood risk management, item 8? No, I think we are done there. Okay, moving on to item 9, work programme 22 to 23. I'm presuming everybody's had a chance to look at it. In our next meeting, we are looking to invite Councillor Andrea Lewis, who was unable to stay for the entirety of the meeting, to discuss some of her agenda points, so we're inviting her back for that. Are there any other comments or queries on item 9? No. Okay. Well, in that case, I will bring the meeting to a close and thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for putting up with me.